If Jesus is God, as Christians believe, and Jesus in the gospel message is primarily love and represents, why do we see such a massive contrast between God of the Old Testament and the New Testament? Oh, beautiful question. All right. So I would like to first say, sorry, I love your questions. You pose them so well. It just takes me a second to gather because you've given so much good information at one shot. Okay, so people like to paint Jesus as the gentle Jesus, but there is actually more talk of Jesus judging, condemning, and bringing judgment and inevitably like hellfire to the world than there is in the Old Testament when it talks about judging. If anything, we see in the Old Testament that God waits usually hundreds and hundreds of years before he acts, and he's patient. Because in the Old Testament, we have essentially, if I remember correctly, around 1,000 years, 1,200 years of documentation, then 400 years of silence. So it's about 1,600 years and then 400 years of silence before Jesus comes. Within that 1,200-year period, it's smashed into maybe 35, 36 of the 37 books in the Old Testament, if I have that correct. 39 books of the Old Testament. So most of those are going to be books that are going to give you a span of around, 1,200 years. And in that time frame, you see how long and how patient God is, and he's working and slowly trying to help the people. He's sending people, turn back, I love you, I love you, I love you. However, when poop does hit the fan, it is, the final nerve. God says, I'm done. I've tried with these people. It's been hundreds and hundreds of years. So, Jesus obviously represents relationship. He represents love. He represents a sacrifice, like we talked about in a few videos ago, that it was necessary to have Jesus die on the cross at the beginning of, before time began, before time, space, matter, and energy began. There was a choice that original sin would eventually make its way in, whether it was through the snake in the garden or whatever it might be. It was going to enter in, and Jesus, the part of the Godhead, knew that he was going to have to enter humanity on some level to give us an opportunity for us as finite beings to become infinite beings. With that being said, Jesus, it says all things were created through him. So as the creator, as the physical representation of God, the hands and the feet per se, you have also that the keys of life and death are given to him. So judgment is going to come through Jesus as well. So as much as it seems like, because of the way Jesus is painted by a lot of people in various denominations, or people who are nominal about God, or whatever it might be, Jesus says phrases like, I've come to bring a spiritual sword to separate families. And when you believe in him and your life is radically changed, and which is the only religion or faith that I know of where Jesus says to love your enemies. When you love your enemy, you're doing something that is countercultural, that is, instinctually against what human beings, what any animal would do, is not to love your enemy, not to pray for your enemy, but to destroy your enemy, to take them over. And God showed that a lot in the Old Testament. He wanted the children of Israel to go out into the world and preach. In fact, he did that with Nineveh. Nineveh was a horrible place with the story of Jonah. And Nineveh was a place that I think for 100 years beforehand had persecuted the Jewish people. I think at one point they had figured out a way, the people of Nineveh, that you could keep someone alive for days and days by burying their body in the desert and just leaving their head above the sand. And the way that they would die is that the sun would beat down and roast your face, and the insects would pick enough at your body while you stayed very hydrated in the sand. Not hydrated, sorry, you stayed very unscathed in the sand. So for however many days you would survive, uh, maybe without water. I think they'd come and give you water, and your body would just, they'd shove water down your throat or whatever. But they were cruel, they were horrible, and that's why Jonah never wanted to, give that testimony of God's love. And then when he inevitably, begrudgingly does go, the whole city changes because they were ripe for God. They wanted to hear about God. They wanted some form of glue to attach their lives together. Everyone's searching for that thing, or for that belief system, or for that faith that glues their entire life together. So, with that being said, I think it's a gross misrepresentation by people, preachers, anyone who's speaking, to somehow say that the God of the Old Testament and Jesus of the New Testament are saying two different messages. God consistently is saying Jesus is coming in the Old Testament as he's manifesting himself in multiple ways, and as human beings are starting to grow mentally. God doesn't just show up and give us a linear sense of thinking. God, when we were, when either in the Garden of Eden or however long that was, and so on and so forth, from that time frame, we had to learn. We had to grow in civilizations. Civilizations also fell down. Like I was enthralled to hear that the Persian Empire, like 600, 700 years before Christ, had full-on plumbing and full-on ventilation systems that worked like air conditioning. Like they would build these tunnels and canals that would capture the wind and cool down the entire city. And they had plumbing, like full-on toilets. I was like, what's going on here? And that's just sadly the winners of war rewrite history, or they demolish if they don't understand what's going on. So I say that to say that it's very hard for us in our 21st century mind to be able to put ourselves in the different time frames as humans matured. But I would say that we have matured, and it's interesting that Jesus came to earth 300 years after Plato and Socrates and all these famous writers and philosophers, came to be, so that we would have maybe the mindset to grasp certain things. The Roman culture was at a pinnacle that we still in some ways have never seen before. It fell from within. The roads that the Romans built, you got to tell the people in Toronto, the roads that the Romans built, there's a lot of those roads are still being used today, 2,000, 2,100, 2,200 years later. So I think as we changed as civilizations, and we matured, God worked with us at the stages we were at. And if you were to think of humanity aging, let's say, and it's kind of a weird analogy because obviously each culture and people group have their own skill sets and abilities. Like, try to match yourself up against, hey Matt, what's going on? Try to match yourself up spiritually, and mentally with what the Egyptians were pumping out. Like, to build those pyramids with that kind of structural integrity, with those kinds of secrets and thought processes, to give like the angles and the coordinates of certain stars, longitude, latitude, like, tell them that they weren't, smart. But with that being said, the development of each of the civilizations has added on to where we're at right now. And as each of those time frames changed, it shows that God is slowly building and working on our minds, working on our hearts, and allowing us to change certain belief systems and thoughts. Again, I'm going the longest way possible to answer this, but you have the elevation of women in pretty much every single culture, except for maybe a Greek culture here and there, maybe an African culture, of different places and tribes in Africa, I think maybe Corinth, where women were kind of goddesses or whatever it might be. Women, at least in the Jewish culture, were considered less than men by a fair long shot. I think it was 2 or 3 women would be the strength of one male witness. And yet when Jesus rose from the grave, he appeared to three women first, which is like, if you wanted to tell a story about your Savior, about the person you're going to die for, which a lot of Christians did in the first century, you're not going to put it and base it on the credibility of women. But now we see hundreds of years later, or thousands of years later, there are women who are being uplifted because of that. And we're seeing the change in human history based off of, and of course, there's extreme feminism, which has taken our world in a completely different, form and void and way, and very, very, very toxic in a different way. But we've seen the ability throughout many cultures to elevate women properly, or to elevate slaves. Like in the New Testament, there's a constant elevation of slaves. So the Old Testament God and Jesus, one and the same. If you actually go through it cover to cover, and you see how God is constantly saying, okay, y'all, I'm trying to help you. I'm going to give you days, weeks, months, years, dozens of years, or hundreds of years to figure it out, and you're still not doing it. Well, I'm going to send you myself. I'm going to send, as God, I'm going to send you a human version to be able to show you how to live, how to love other people, give you a glimpse of what it can be like on earth, but for the most part, what it'll be like in heaven for eternity. I will die for you. I will make it so that the bridge is gapped and that you can live in perfection with me. And then inevitably, Jesus will also, full circle, who was that person, fully man, fully God, inevitably follows through with that, and then will be judged in Judgment Day. Yeah, Jesus, throughout the New Testament, if I remember correctly, there is more speaking of judgment and of overall totality through Jesus than there was through God in the Old Testament. If you'd like to check out any of the Dad Doing Dishes videos, just check them out right here in the playlist. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do that right here. Like and comment would be super cool. Just want to say thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day, evening, or your night. God bless.